Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Design and Manage. Today we prepare the city for future expansion by building a highway that will cross the map and will provide access to core locations of the city. We also build a couple of crazy interchanges along the way. So stick around to watch the building process and see the final result. Enjoy the video! Alright, so the reason I'm doing this project and I'm building a secondary highway that is crossing the map is none other than traffic management. When your city develops and you start having a lot of residents and a lot of activity in the city, it's important to have as many highway connections as possible so that the traffic doesn't funnel down to one particular set of connections and clog the entire system. This particular highway that I'm building, for example, is going to serve a major high-density residential area that is going to be located on a flatland at the center of the map, and it's also going to serve a major industrial area that is going to be the oil specialized industry. So for me it makes a lot of sense to provide easy access to these areas by building this particular highway. I start off by building a highway segment on the coast of the river that is located on the most western part of the map. This is going to be our first connection to the regional highway. Because this area is so tight, I squeeze my highway between the river and also the mountain, use the curved road tool and adapt the terrain as necessary, and then I also use a tunnel to eventually connect with the regional highway. For this connection I use the three-way interchange that comes with the default game. This is going to be more than enough for what I'm trying to do, at least for the time being. And I place a couple of these two interchanges. This will give me two access points. One of them is going to be used to connect with my highway that I am right now just building, and the other one is going to provide access to this area of the map when I start working on it. This can be adjusted later on as necessary. Moving on, I create a couple of bridges that cross the river and I then make a connection. I thought about making a loop over here, but then I changed my mind and I went for a much simpler connection. When crossing the flatlands, I meet up with the regional railroad and I had to make a decision on how I would bypass it. Because the rail is on an elevated location, I could simply go for a tunnel and make the highway go underneath the rail, but I decided to do something more interesting, so I went ahead and built a sunken highway and make the rail a bridge over it. For this I use the terrain tool to set the sunken part of where the highway is going to go through. I rebuild the rail to make a bridge and then I try and connect the highway as smooth and efficiently as possible. As I've said before, this highway is going to serve a major residential area that is going to be built in this flatland. So I think ahead and I place yet another three-way interchange to provide access to this area. Again, I use the terrain tool to make everything as smooth as possible and make very little elevation changes on the highway. And here comes the craziest part of the video in my opinion, which is the building of the connection to the highway in the eastern part of the map, which is the area that we are currently building our city on. This area is going to have quite a lot of traffic because first and foremost is located at the exact center of the map that we're playing on. It's going to be the middle of two main industrial complexes, the farming industry and also the oil specialized industry that I'm going to build in the future. So I know that I had to provide a lot of connections in this location. This was also quite a challenging intersection to make because, again, the regional highway is located on a hill, and I didn't just want to slap on a cloverleaf interchange in this area, because I think it wouldn't look natural. So I decided to go again for a sunken connection, making our crossing highway go underneath the main regional highway, and then make the connections from here and adapt the on and off ramps to the terrain. I also have another rail to bypass, so again I extend the sunken part of the highway to this location as well, and make the rail bridge over the entire structure. I eventually come back to this interchange because I forgot to build a couple of connections, as you will see later on in this time-lapse. As I'm building this highway, I think to myself, well, this is already complex enough, so why don't we make it even more complex by building an additional avenue that provides local access to the region without interfering with the main highway traffic. And this is eventually what I end up doing. And I sunk this avenue as well and make the highway go over it. This avenue will connect to the Tadima town that we have built on the very first episode of this series, the farming district, and also the service hall area, where we are going to build a lot of service facilities such as trash management and also water treatment. I'll talk a little bit about this later on in the video. To make all the connections in this highway, I use a combination of the elevation step to elevate the roads and make bridges, but I also use the terrain tool to elevate the terrain itself, trying to make organic and natural shapes to the terrain and bridging as very little as possible, just to provide that natural look and feel to the terrain, which I think makes it look much better than if I were just slamming everything with bridges. Now I'm building the second custom interchange of this video. This one is not as crazy as the first one, and this is going to provide access to the oil specialized industry that I'm going to build in this area. Here I just make a set of simple on and off ramps that connect directly to a highway underneath the main highway, and then I finish up the ends with roundabouts so that people can travel from one side of the highway to the other. I then finish off by trying to plan out the main avenue of this area that will connect the extractor buildings to the processing buildings. Then I go back to the starter town, or the small neighborhood that we have built on the very first episode of this video. Here I know that I want to bring an avenue that will go and climb the slope that you're seeing on the right side and provide access to that location where we are currently building our main interchange. And for that I needed to adapt our road network and build an avenue that will eventually lead to that direction. So I had to demolish quite a few buildings and rework this area. Remember on the very first episode where I've told you that you should plan ahead and define where all your main connections will be? Well, this is the reason why. Because I failed to see this, or I didn't think about this little detail, I now have to do this type of work and completely destroy the businesses and houses of some of the citizens of our city. Thankfully, this is only a game. Because I'm modifying the road network of this location, I also need to rethink my zoning, so I put up some commercial on the sides of the avenue, because these are the noisiest parts of the city, and I zone everything else with residential. I also have to rebuild the bicycle path that we have destroyed when building this avenue. Here you can have a better overview of what I'm doing, And as you can see, I am connecting the avenue that we have built on the starter town directly to the avenue that we have built going underneath the main highway. I try a couple of connections here and eventually I go with the one that looks the best for me. Moving on to the northeastern part of the map, I then plan out the road layout of this area. This entire location is going to be a service area where I'm going to place a lot of service buildings. So our trash management facilities, our water treatment plants and also our power plants will be placed in this area. If we have the space for it, we can also place a couple of unique factories here because this area is right in the middle of our farming industry and also our future oil industry. So it's a location that provides easy access to both of these locations. If we have even more space for it, I can also add a small residential neighborhood. I'll eventually adapt the layout to the size of the buildings that I'm gonna place here, but for the time being I connect all the avenues that I had ending up in dead ends. Then I finish off my interchange. I realized I was missing a set of 4 connections, so I had to squeeze this area even more and get a bit more creative to build this crazy interchange. But in the end I am satisfied with the final result and I think it's going to be very effective with traffic. And here's the final result of this entire building process. Okay guys, so here's a general overview of everything that we have so far. Here you can see the entire highway that we have just built and how it connects with the 2 original highways that we had going on the map. So let's take a closer look, shall we? So starting off with the western side, we have this double 3-way interchange that I have just built. And as I've said, this area provides access to our newly built highway by using a tunnel, and it also has an access point that provides access to this location. I still don't know what I'm gonna build here in the future or if this singular connection is enough for this, but if not, we can just readjust it later on. Now, going on, we have this little segment of land, and I think I will in the future add another highway connection, another highway interchange that will come here and connect with this segment of road, or this avenue that I will later convert to an avenue. The only problem here is that if I do that, then I know for sure that there will be people that will use this main local avenue to go to this part of the city instead of traveling through the highway. So that's something that I have to think about. One of the things that I can do in this area to minimize the impact of traffic is to apply the heavy traffic ban policy to Tadima Coast, so that we can at least filter out all the trucks that want to go to the farming district, forcing them to use the highway instead. But anyway, moving on to this gigantic flatland, as I've said, this is where I'm going to build a major residential area here in the mountains. This area is fairly big, so it allows for a fairly decent sized town. And we even have rail access, so we can build a regional train station here and focus a lot of activity in this location. We can even make our first high density town of the entire city. We'll still have to think about that. Moving on, when crossing the river, oh, and let me just give you a closer look of this connection. As you can see, the highway is going right beneath the rail, which I think looks very nicely indeed. But then we can come here and cross the bridge, and here we have one of the main interchanges that I have built in this video. This is going to provide access to the industrial layout, and here I'm thinking of building my extractor buildings on one side of the highway. So on the area that has brown soil, this is the area that is rich in oil, and then I will place my processing buildings on the other side of the highway. I also have this avenue to provide easy access between the extractor buildings and also our processing buildings. I still need to figure out a way to make the local trucks use this avenue instead of going through this interchange. I want the interchange to be used exclusively for trucks going in and out of the industry. I want my extractors and my processors to use the local avenue instead, so I still need to figure out a way of how I'm going to achieve this and prevent the local trucks from using the highway, from crossing from one way to the other. And here's the crown jewel of this entire video, this crazy interchange that is right on top of the hill. This interchange, in contrast with most of the interchanges that I usually build, is not symmetrical at all, so it's totally asymmetric. I tried to make it as natural looking and organic and adapted to the terrain as much as possible, and I think I've done a good job, especially with the integration of the avenue and also the railroad. This was quite a challenge, but I am quite satisfied with what I have accomplished. I still don't know how this is going to behave when we start having those huge flows of traffic, especially when we build our oil industry, but we'll just have to wait and see and make the necessary modifications if we have to. I know that a lot of people are not going to enjoy this off-ramp. They will say it's very unnatural and it's also quite dangerous to drive here, and I kinda agree, but to be honest, I've seen worse in real life, so this doesn't really shock me. Oh, by the way, a particular trick that you can use. As you can see here, we have this lane of the off-ramp connecting exclusively to this lane of the highway, and we have this lane over here connect to the left lane of the highway. And you can see this by looking at the traffic arrows. As you can see, one of the arrows is indicating a right turn, and the other arrow is indicating a left turn. So both lanes have their own dedicated merging lanes and they do not interfere with each other when merging. If I've done something like this, for example, let me just pause the simulation and delete this road, and I add a straight road instead, like this. Now I do not have a left turn, I only have this straight arrow. This indicates that traffic can go to either the right or left lane. This is a problem because now cars will start slowing down when trying to merge here, because there's a possibility they will want to go to the right lane, which is the lane that is currently being used by the cars merging on the other lane. So one of the tricks that I use to manipulate traffic flow on a vanilla gameplay is try to make an angular shape when connecting the highway. So instead of making a straight road, if I do something like this and I connect it at an angle, now I have a left turn sign. So this is just a small trick, or one of the small tricks that I use to make my traffic flow better in my cities. It doesn't look very natural, this little curve here, but it works, and that's the most important part. Moving on, I then have my highway and also my avenue coming side to side. I finish up my highway at a roundabout, and this is where I'm going to build my service hall area with all the trash management buildings and also the power and water supplies. And I connect all of the avenues that I had coming out of the farming district. With this we have everything interconnected and we already have a couple of trucks using this new system. But anyway guys, that's going to be it for this video. I hope you have enjoyed it and I hope to see you again on episode number 7. Take care and as always, have fun!